potential of existing operations is the biggest concern for our panelists. All of them with mine operations in Mexico have faced the challenges with deeper and older mines, heightened risk, shortages of critical infrastructure, and resource nationalism has provided the members of this panel opportunities to thrive in this new paradigm for enhancing performance with limited opportunities for expansion and growth. This is the first question for the panel. We would like to start talking about your teams, since human capital is a pillar of a company's success. As the leader of your organization, how do you ensure the vision of the company is aligned throughout your organization? And we can start with Jody.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jesus. I'll start on that one. I could talk about my team all day because people are definitely the pillar of our company's success. I mean, ultimately, without your people, what do we all have? Just rock in the ground. It takes people to drill it, blast it, muck it, move it, grind it, process it. And then it takes even more people to wrap a business around that, run financials on it, hire people, run your supply chain, run contractors. And so because mining is a complex business, I think people are really integral to that. And because it's an integrated business and takes so many people to run an operation, it's important that they're really aligned with the strategy and the vision of the company from the top to the bottom. I mean, at our operations at Minera, Media Luna, and Guerrero, we have 1,000 employees and another 1,000 contractors. They all have to work together to get gold produced safely. And the way that we do it to align our folks from top to bottom is through clarity of strategy and vision, for sure. But we do it with culture and values. That's what we really focus on. I think Torex has a pretty unique culture. We use something called systems leadership theory, which is a set of integrated principles really designed at getting everybody to willingly give the best they've got every day they show up to work. And that's really embedded in our values. Some companies are different about this, but Torex, our values have been the same since day one. They'll never change. The executives don't get together every year and write them and rewrite them. We have really 6 of them, and they're on a continuum, and we look at them as values lived. If we're operating on the left-hand side of the continuum, trustworthy, loving, courageous, dignifying, honest, and fair, we know we're doing the right thing. If we operate on the right-hand side of the continuum, untrustworthy, unloving, and etc., we know we're not showing up the way we want to. So I think getting clear on what the strategy is and the vision is, but really importantly, doing that against the foundation of culture and values is how you ensure that the how you execute the strategy with 2,000 people is aligned from top to bottom, side to side.
Thank you. Thank you. Arturo, do you need me to repeat the question?
No, I don't think so. I've been reading it. Thank you very much. This question applies very well to our company Magna Gold and the stage we are at. We acquired a distressed mine. We had to put it back in operation. So we had to make sure that people understood what we were doing and we were going and what was required of them. So alignment is fundamental in any organization, and in our case is vital. Every person in the company has to have a clear understanding of what our mission and objectives are, where we are now and where are we going. And our vision is to grow. But to get there, we need to make sure that our tactics in the short term work out. And our tactics in the short term are dollars per ton and dollars per ounce. Every person in the organization has to understand what their individual contributions are and will be. Every person in the organization has to understand what is expected of them and why And the why is very important. And all of this keep them, keep people very passionately involved. And fortunately, that has been creating a culture in our company, passion. And aligning people is how will every person's contribution be measured in a simple manner. No more than 5 key performance indicators. And the most important, what is your contribution to the bottom line? And this goes to departments and people and line managers. But the bottom line is what are you contributing in the end in dollars per ton, dollars per ounce, either by adding more production or by reducing cost. But that has to be a continuous flow of information, feedback. And we are trying to do this like on a daily basis. What was expected of you today with respect to the short-term and long-term plan, and what effect did it have on the company's cash flow? And it's good practice to, it's not easy, but it's good practice to see what you are earning every day. And you have to have the platforms, adequate platforms to be able to do that. But at the core of all of this is communication, and Jody mentioned it, and it's communication from top to bottom. And more important to us right now is from bottom to top in the hierarchy of the company. The feedback that we get from line supervisors, for example, is fundamental to resolve issues. The people in the field, they need to understand that they will be heard. They have to talk, because all the problems and the day-to-day problems who have an effect on the long term, they are right there. They're in the field. And if you talk to people in the field, you get their feedback and openly, then it saves you a lot of time and makes them important. So that's what I think is the importance of the alignment of the vision and the top to bottom in any organization for the short term and the long term.
Thank you, Arturo. John?
Yes, good afternoon. Pleasure to be with you. That was very interesting to hear Arturo and Jody talk about these issues. They're certainly common themes that all of our companies share. And in Alamos' experience, we went to Mexico as a very, very small company. We had acquired effectively an option on the Mulatos project initially, and there was only 4 employees in the whole company at that point in time. And we were effectively scrambling. It was 2001, and gold prices were under $300 an ounce, and nobody cared very much about gold, and very few people expected us to succeed. It was about as challenging a proposition as you could imagine, to take on a project like that. Even to just buy it, we made a down payment, but we effectively agreed to buy it for $10 million, and we didn't even have $500,000 in the treasury. And raising money was, not that easy in that kind of environment. So I would say for the first few years, trying to get going was just a flat out scramble. And it was a very small team of very dedicated people that we were too busy to discuss anything with respect to, values and, how do we essentially create a corporate culture and everything else. There was no corporate culture other than let's try to make this happen and let's survive. But look how far we've come. We were a company when we initially signed on the dotted line, we were a company with less than a $1 million market cap. And today we're a company with more than a $4 billion valuation. So we've evolved. And as time went on, we had to learn along the way. And to run a company with 6 people, a dozen people, even before going into production, we had a grand total of 40 people working for us when we got the green light to get ready to build that project. Well, today, similarly, we have probably upwards of 1,400 people working at Mulatos in Mexico, between contractors and employees. And throughout the company, we have in excess of, well in excess of 2,000 people. And that is different. Now you're running a big organization, and you absolutely need to come up with a common purpose, and you've got to have a set of values that support holding an organization like that together. And so it would have been, I'm going to say 6 years ago, when we said, we certainly can sit around here and decide in a boardroom what our values ought to be, but what do our employees actually think about these things? What do our employees think is important? And so we went out and asked them, and we spoke to virtually every employee on this issue, and then we did a poll. We sent out a questionnaire, and remarkably, we received, I recall very well, we've never done as well since, but we got 94% of those questionnaires back. So people were really, they were concerned about getting their voice heard. They consider this an important issue. And out of that, we essentially derived a set of values that everybody could buy into, because it came from the organization itself. And I think it's extremely important to adhere to those values. For example, we can talk all day long about employee safety, but when something like a pandemic hits, well, what do you do as a company? Is employee safety just some sort of motherhood issue that you have chalked up there on your website? But when it really comes time to make the tough decisions, like closing down operations to ensure that you've got a safe working environment, and not restarting until all the protocols are in place, and you can absolutely assure by bringing people back to work they're going to be working in a safe environment. That's what really counts. When you make the decisions based on those values, and your employees see you making decisions based on those values, then there's a buy-in. Then they realize that you're not just saying you care about employee safety, but you're willing to sacrifice production and revenues and so forth in the name of that value. And that's that was a very telling year, 2020, for all of us, and for Alamos in particular, as we had to manage 3 operations and 2 fairly significant construction projects in the face of a global pandemic. And it was in that particular circumstance, and in many other circumstances along the way. I think, for example, of how impoverished the region is where we're working. When we first came there, just how poorly those communities were doing, and how much better off they are today by virtue of the fact that we're there. We've created employment. We've been able to help with infrastructure. We've built schools. We've built playgrounds. We've built a Zocalo. We've built a beautiful town square. We've built a church, a medical facility, a community hall, and all of these things have had such a significant impact. You can see, particularly among the children, they take so much more pride in their school and where they live, and if that doesn't really move your heart, if that doesn't make you consider that mining has a purpose that goes far beyond the production of metal, then you've entirely missed the point. So I would say that in those practical ways that we've employed the values that have effectively empowered the organization and given it a sense of purpose and direction, I would say that that is probably what keeps our people coming to work and keeps them employed with us year after year, and gives them a sense of pride as far as being a part of our organization is concerned.
Thank you. Thank you. Steve, can we get your input on this very important question?
Sure. You know, it's an interesting question. You know, I've worked at 4 tier 1 companies over my years, and the answers vary on how you get alignment with the workforce and vision. And First Majestic, you know, it's a company that was founded in the early 2000s by Keith Niemeyer. And the company was built through mainly merger acquisitions. And so every time you walk into a new site, it's got a different culture, a different history. People have different attitudes. And so our workforce of over 5,000 is pretty diverse. And each group has their own view of what their role is at that particular operation. So if you talk to Majestic Services employees or salary employees, they'll give you an answer. And if you talk to our union-based employees, they'll give you something maybe a little different. And if you talk with your contractors that you use to help you run your business and build new plants and things like that, they're going to give you a little different spin. So it's never ceased to amaze me that what the C-suite generally considers to be the vision doesn't always translate easily to the people on the front line. And you have to understand from their own perspective, whether you're a scoop tram operator or a driller, a mechanic or an electrician, or even a supervisor or an engineer, they're all going to approach your vision with a different perspective. So the way we've done it is we try to focus on you know, what makes the company culture and values valuable. And we try to tie that to a very close line of sight to the frontline worker. Because, you know, they may not care too much about earnings per share, or in fact, they may not care a lot about ounces of production. So we focus on the things and the values in our company that we think are important, that translate to the communities in which we work and our workforces. And we use a lot of communications with people, and we try to stay consistent on those points. It's interesting to me how some operations view the company's vision differently than others. And for me, there's 2 things. One is you have to have really strong, frequent communications, and everybody wants to hear from the top of the company anytime they get a chance. And so I think it's worthwhile to have your senior leadership face to face, as close as you can be, as frequent as you can be with your workforce. You know, spreading the message of, you know, why are we here and what are we doing and why does it make a difference? The other thing is, I think your supervision staff and your management staff, they really need to be visible in their leadership and walk the talk. And I think some of the other panelists have talked about that already, but you've got to communicate a consistent message of what's important, and somehow it has to tie to people. That scoop tram operator, it needs to make a difference to them, and they need to feel that. So we try to put systems in place to where, you know, if we're going to focus on growth, for example, as part of our strategy, and we think it's important, we want to explain that all the way down to the front line so that they understand why growth at San Dimas or growth in La Encantada or Santa Elena or somewhere else makes a difference for them. And if you can connect those 2 things, then you've done a good job in building your vision for your company.
Thank you. Let's go to the next question. And since we're running a little bit long on the answers, let's focus on this one This next question is about describing the expertise of your technical team to develop and build your operations in Mexico. And what we're gonna focus on this question is, can you share any lessons learned? And if you could help me keep those answers to a couple of minutes, that'd be great to attempt to get through the entire set of questions that we started with the intent to do. Arturo?
Thank you. Thank you. I'll go straight to the point. Mexico has a very good operators and technical personnel, engineers, mine managers. Mining companies rely less and less on expats. And I've seen that over the last 20, 25 years. We have very good schools. We've been a mining country for 500 years. And we are creating people, the universities are preparing people that are very good geologists, metallurgists, electromechanical engineers, people in IT, environmental engineers. So that's something that Mexico has accomplished over the years. And thanks to the availability, thanks to the influence of the Canadian and foreign mining companies that have been allowed to invest in Mexico, because they brought in a lot of this, coupled with our technical schools and the universities. Foreign companies have brought in lots of knowledge. What do we lack? I think that what we lack in Mexico, people in the area of economic geology and explorationists with world experience that are able to make more discoveries. Mexico is ripe for discoveries. The Sierra Madre is amazing everywhere, but we still rely a lot on good old-fashioned, old-school, well-versed economic geologists from Canada, the U.S., Australia, England, and so that's something that we need to work on. And the other area that we need to improve on is on learning as Mexican operators and managers how to communicate with investors, and also have the operators, the managers of operations, understand the importance of investors. What do they want to hear? How do you communicate what you've accomplished? Because we, beyond the position of an investor relations or corporate development person in the head office and the whole network around it, we have to be able to train and have our people understand how to communicate and prioritize things, and how to be able to identify what's really key. The priority is the Pareto. And so we are, I think we're on the right track. We are it's our difficult business. Again, we depend on foreign investment. There's no money in Mexico for exploration. There's no money for mining. It's nowhere. There's a couple of institutions, government institutions, but they are not up to the size. So we have to be dealing with Mother Nature. And for that, we have to bring risk investment.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Steve?
Sure, I'll keep my answer short. We find that, first of all, we don't have almost no expats that work in Mexico. Our corporate group is really corporate focused out of Vancouver, less than 40. And so all of our technical expertise, the majority of our technical expertise resides in Mexico. And we have a two-tier system. We have a lot of site expertise from geologists, planners, exploration people, metallurgists, those types of folks. They're very good, very strong. But we also have a regional group in Durango, which is kind of subject matter experts. And these are kind of like super users, like geotechnical, metallurgical people. We have people like in our central lab that are ISO certified, those types of things. So we have a two-tier approach, and we find the technical expertise very strong in Mexico, and it's worked really well for us, definitely.
Thank you. John? You're
John,
muted.
you're on mute. I mean, it wouldn't be a Zoom call in 2020 if someone doesn't say you're on mute. So
I didn't know. I guess I was muted. We've been operating in Mexico for quite a number of years now. We started construction on our first mine back in 2004. And while, you know, everybody understands that we operate within the Mulatos district, what may not be appreciated is that we're now in the process of building our fifth mining operation within that district. 4 of those were open pit operations, and one of them was an underground operation. And when we first started in Mexico, we had a 7-year mine life. And considering our first production was 2005, we would have been finished by 2012. But as a result of discoveries and developing those discoveries into mining operations, here we are in 2021, and we still have about a 7-year reserve out in front of us at Mulatos. And my expectation is, you know, we've only covered about 25% of the property. There's a lot more ground to explore, and I hope we continue to find more mines and build more new mines. But what I would say is the best thing that we did was to try to cultivate and grow a construction team, and we've managed to achieve that. And the current team that is the fellow who heads that team, he's in the process of building his third mine now at Mulatos. And so there's nothing greater than that hands-on experience and all the things that are entailed with you know, with permitting and community relations and so forth, dealing with, in our case, dealing with ejidos and ranchers and so forth. That can get pretty complicated. You know, from time to time we have to deal with narcos that just wander out of the bush and drop in some cases lost to try to find their way. You know, you need really experienced people in that kind of circumstance. Certainly, they are very well educated. That's a given. But by now, just given the amount of time they've been involved in the district and the success they've had, you know, repeatedly by, you know, building good projects, and effectively everything we've built has been built on time and on budget. They've been very, very good projects. There's just no substitute for really good experience, really good people, and I feel really fortunate that these people have, this group has stuck with us and allowed us to do as well as we've done for as long as we've done. We haven't done anything outside of Mulatos, and that is not a plan. That was more to do with circumstances, and I do hope that we get more support and encouragement from the federal government to demonstrate that they are going to support this industry, so that we can continue to grow. Because right now, that's not exactly obvious.
Okay. Thank you. Jody?
Yeah, I can wrap up the topic fairly quickly. I mean, like John's expressing, our mine site has gone through its evolution too. We're not on mine 5, but we're starting in on mine 2. Our Alamos asset was developed and built from the period of 2010 to 16, and then we were from there into stability and optimization on production. Our next asset, Minera Media Luna, the mine across the river, is set to come online in January of 2024. We're in feasibility study on that, which represents a very significant investment in the state of Guerrero at a time that I would argue that they need it. And in terms of the expertise of the team, it's the expertise of the team in Mexico that made that all happen. The development, the build, the optimization, the stability, and now our mine across the river. And I would echo the comments of Arturo and Steve that the lesson learned for me is that the expertise very much lives in Mexico. There will always be some specialized roles that you got to go abroad for, overseas for, with really sophisticated equipment or really specific metallurgical or technical problems. But by and large, the expertise lives there. And like Steve was saying, at our work site, 99% of our workforce comes from Mexico. A full 70% come from Guerrero State. We're very proud of that, and we really tap into local communities for employment. And when you do that, not only do you get the technical expertise, you get people who actually understand the culture that they're operating in. And so this idea of getting supervisors who could connect with employees, you have people who know the industry, know what they're doing, and then they have the ability to connect as well. And I do want to touch on what John said a little bit about support from the federal government. I think it's very important that governments at all levels in Mexico understand that uncertainty is the enemy of investment. I've said it before, I'll say it again. And when there is uncertainty in policy, economic policy, tax policy, royalty policy, whether you can actually develop on your concessions, operators don't like that, mining companies don't like that, and investors really don't like that. And so if there's a message that I think is worth talking about in the context of the work that all of us are doing for government, it's to create that certainty. And where things do have to change, consult with the mining industry. Consultation is very important. Come and talk to us. Ask us about what these tax implications could do to your ability to develop and build a particular project. And so I would say expertise lives in Mexico, uncertainty is the enemy of investment, and consultation for Mexican government, all very important themes that I think are worthy of talking about.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that lines up great with our next question that has to do with the key tools and techniques, investment technologies that have improved the performance of your operations in Mexico. And let's go to Arturo.
Thank you. To me and to us, tool number one is cost control. We need a very agile cost control platform so that for all levels of the organization, we have to permanently monitor the performance of each area and be able to react on time in case of a problem. And we should be able also to optimize our cash flows based on all of the variability that this industry is subject to. So this is the bottom line. We have to invest more and train more people, our people, on the basic elements of a mine. The geological modeling is fundamental. And I've seen disasters after big investments have been carried out where the metal is simply not there. And that is very important to make sure that we have in-house and with the proper support, the ability to do our geological modeling and be able to come up with reliable resources. And that goes hand in hand with, again, with the metallurgical testing. And that is an element that it's very, very tied to the ore body is, it's ore and how do you recover it? And so we have to spend more on training our people and spending more money on platforms that will allow us to expand our metallurgical laboratories. And that also, everything is, I think it's interrelated. Automation, in our case, we don't have automation yet. It's important, it's critical. And I'm talking about permanent monitoring of the consumption of reagents, in our case, cyanide, and be able to adapt and modulate, and thus, optimizing the metallurgical recoveries. And finally, it's all about people. So we need to be, we need certifications. We need the ISO quality certifications. We need to implement and spend money on lean management, on lean practices, on making sure that at every stage of the organization we are detecting waste, and give people the platform to be able to identify areas where we are losing money, or putting especially putting people in a situation of unsafety, and also be able to detect and monitor on time environmentally what's going on environmentally in our case. And there's also platforms that we've used in the past, we're going to regain the social interaction, and that's basic. Fortunately, we do have a very good communication with the community, because we have been also very close to them. So I would say those are the core tools for us to pursue.
Thank you. Thank you. Jody?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Arturo focused on tools, so I think I'll talk a little bit about technologies on this question. At Torex, we consider ourselves to be innovators. We embrace it. We really like it. Not to take on unnecessary risk, but to really drive value and mitigate risk. And I think I'll just give two examples. I heard the panel before talking about tailings dams and tailings dams failure. There have been a number of them, Mount Poly, Bermudino, Samarco, and they've been a real stain on the industry. And so I'm quite proud to say at our site, we have one of the largest filtered tailings storage facilities in the world. So this means instead of pumping slurried tailings to a pit or a pond and then building dams around it, we filter and dry stack our tailings, which essentially negates this risk of a complete dam failure and tailings runout, which is really important to us because we operate in a highly seismic area. And so not only have we essentially negated the risk of a tailings dam failure, it's better for the environment. We use about 1.5 million cubic meters of water a year less than a traditional tailings impoundment. And it's just as, while a little bit more expensive, certainly a better play for risk management, especially given today's environment, and better for water consumption. The other innovation I just want to touch on very quickly, because it's the hallmark of our site, if anyone's ever visited it, we call it RopeCon, a rope conveyor. It's essentially a 1.3 kilometer conveyor that spans a 400-meter delta from the top of the pit to our processing plant. And it literally moves ore down continuously into the process plant. And that was put in for safety reasons, primarily to mitigate the risk of loaded haul trucks driving down very steep switchbacks. And so when we did it for safety risks, we also realized cost benefits. So the bottom line improvements, fewer trucks, fewer spending on trucks. And that RopeCon generates a meg of its own energy. So not only do we have a safety risk mitigated, we have a very efficient way to transport ore, and something that helps with our carbon footprint. And I would say that's been my experience with intelligent technology implementation. Not only does it help on costs and efficiencies, it also usually helps on safety and environment as well. So you can fire on all cylinders when you do it right.
Thank you. Steve?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, in my previous lifetime, I actually led the technology efforts for Phelps Dodge and Freeport McMoran. So I spent quite a bit of time in the technical innovation side. In First Majestic, though, part of our strategy for growth is to use innovative technologies to basically give us a competitive advantage over what some other companies can't do. And I'll give you an example of that. We put in a high intensity grinding mill. We call it the Hig Mill in Santa Elena. We worked with Autotech on installing that, and we saw a really significant increase in the liberation of gold and silver and big movements in recovery of precious metals. And we're planning to implement that throughout the company where it makes sense. So we worked closely with Autotech to do that, and that included with our people learning how to run the Hig, which is quite different. It's not a verti mill. It's an interesting technology, and it doesn't work for every ore body. Another thing we were doing on the energy front, mines consume a ton of energy, and one of the things we're doing at Santa Elena is we're just commissioning this month a big LNG power plant facility on site that is an agreement between us and a company called Salenza that basically was very low upfront money on our part to invest in this power plant. It cuts our carbon footprint by over 50%, and it cuts our direct energy bills by over 35%. It's also pretty reliable. The final thing I'd say, and it's more about how work gets done, and I know this question included a comment about lean. I'm a big advocate of lean systems. We use value stream mapping, or VSM, to basically dig out value and get rid of waste. But we also have a real simple process. Actually, I picked up from some good friends of mine that worked at Rio Tinto, which is just 5S. And we add an S on the end of that for 6S, which is the safety component. And we use Lean 5S to basically organize and get all kinds of functions within the business in good order, very well organized, very well planned, so that we execute on work. Could be as simple as a PM of a scoop very quickly, and it's very effective. And the thing I like about it is the guys on the ground can relate to it very quickly. And you can see the difference when you implement 5S across these operations, how it looks, how it feels. If you look at your garage, if your garage is a mess, you're looking for a part, you can't find it, it's frustrating. But if you're well organized and you're well coordinated, those mechanics can really pick up on the wrench time, and their whole attitude towards their workplace and their job really improves. So those are some of the tactics and some of the strategies that our company is using.
Thank you, Steve. John? You're muted.
Thank you. That's a very broad sort of coverage that you've received so far. But I would say, if I just think of three buckets, engineering, design, metallurgy, and exploration. In each of those three areas, we've concentrated on for example, trying to design and build projects that minimize environmental impact, that keep costs low, clearly built to achieve a safe working environment. With respect to metallurgy, you can have a big deposit, but if you're mining it and your metallurgy is poor, you're just not going to recover very much of your metal, and that's just terribly inefficient. And you only get to mine it once. We always say, you get one shot at it. You better do it right. And then finally, a big issue throughout Mexico was the fact that, they're right across the country, mining companies are rapidly depleting their resources. And this is something faced industry-wide, but it's something that I see very specifically in Mexico. And without the push that you typically get in a high gold price environment to explore and to find more resources, eventually, the country's going to run out. And, that will be a very sad day. So we're spending considerable amounts of money in exploration in Mexico, but very, very concentrated on what we're doing. We're not venturing out and doing a tremendous amount of greenfields exploration. We're mostly focused on brownfields exploration. But in terms of those three buckets, starting with exploration, over time, we've developed techniques, some of them that are well known in the industry, some of them that are maybe a little bit proprietary, that are helping us to find new deposits within that district. And the people that we have working on this, a combination of Mexican nationals and expats, they've become very, very good at what they do. And that's why we're still mining at Mulatos, 16 years after we started first production. And by this time, we've mined well over 2.5 million ounces of gold, and it's going to continue to go for some time. Engineering design, I mean, that's a big topic, but I'll give one example. We had a great area for a leach pad in one valley, and the deposit was sitting basically in a hill in an adjoining valley. There was a big barren cap on top of it. We mined the cap, we created a land bridge, and then we built a conveyor across the land bridge. And we convey ore from the mine over to the leach pad area. It's about a 2.5 kilometer long conveyor. And at the time we built it, it was the longest conveyor in Mexico. And it was considered, we were considered crazy for doing it because the capital cost at that time was pretty substantial. And also we were only going to build a 10,000 ton per day mine, and we put in a conveyor that could handle 20,000 tons a day. So what the heck were we thinking? Well, about 7 years after we went into production, we were operating at 20,000 tons a day. So there you go. You had to be thinking ahead, and it kind of gets to, one point that I hope to make at some point in this panel, and that is what Mexico needs more than anything else is long-range thinking. And you can't think long-range if you don't have the reserves and if you don't have policies that you can depend on for the long term. And the only way you're going to build up reserves so you can plan for the long term is to drill, is to spend, substantial amounts of money on exploration so you can get way out ahead of your production. And the only way companies are going to do that is if they feel that the policies are going to be in place to support that type of investment. So this industry needs long-term thinking, and we don't seem to see it in government, and we don't seem to see it among our investors. That's a fact. The investors that we have to turn around and speak to practically every quarter are far too focused on the short term. And this is deadly for mining. So, we can have all the best ideas and, all we can employ, and we absolutely can employ innovation and new exploration techniques and great engineering and great metallurgical insights and so forth. And it all doesn't amount to much if we can't think about designing something for the long term, because it takes, ultimately, it takes a big investment, whether that's in exploration or in engineering, construction. It takes a big, big investment. And it's absolutely the way the industry has to go and the way it wants to go, but it can't get there without solid support from the governments where we operate and from the investors that actually own the company.
Okay, thank you. So now we have about 7 minutes left. So we really need to keep your answers short for this next question. So the question is, it is vital to consider factors beyond the economics of a mine in order to be successful. Factors such as the social license, environmental regulations, skilled labor, technology. Which of these do you consider the most, that have the most weight in defining the true potential of a mining operation? And I think if we need to wrap up this by 4 We are going to have about a minute answer on this question. John?
Again, you know, it comes down to a combination of things, but I think really good planning at the start. Ultimately, unless that's in place, no matter how good your people are going, they're going to head off in the wrong direction. So I think from the get-go, we've got to consider you know, the skill sets required to plan and design a really good operation that it's low cost, so can withstand the cyclicality of the metals that we produce, and ultimately support long-term investment. I think I think that's going to be one of the keys for the industry going forward.
Okay, thank you. Arturo?
Human capital is core. Nothing is possible without human capital. No investments are possible, no mines are possible. People have to be and feel safe, protected, well-trained. People have to be well-paid and well-motivated to have them engaged passionately, and they also have to know what's their path to the future. We are guests in the communities we operate, and we have to be good guests. And fortunately, mining companies are very good guests. The communities we go and we operate on have their qualities of life have increased tremendously. This is the case of Mulatos, the one that is closer to me. In our case, we are very active with the community. We participate in health campaigns, training people locally. We are planning. We have in one of our first priorities after we settle things down is to create a school of trade. Because what happens is that when a mine it's depleted, you end up with a ghost town, and the people who work there, you know, they just have to leave and find some other place to work. So I think it would be very important for us as a company to leave people with a trade so that they can go out and for whatever reason the mine closes, they can go out and find work properly trained, and after that happens. So that's very important for us.
Thank you. Steve?
Yeah, I'll just keep it short. I think in Mexico is particularly sensitive to community relations with the ejidos and land access. It's a little different than most places in the world. And I think if you're going to be successful in Mexico in this business, your community relations has to be really strong. And we've been tested in this pandemic, and we've provided enormous support for our communities in keeping people safe, testing. We have 2 PCR labs. They belong to Red Arrow and another group in Hermosillo that we use. PPE, all these kinds of things. We even built a camp in Santa Elena to pull people out of the community because they were nervous about all the people coming in. So if you're going to do business in Mexico, from my perspective, your community relations has to be really strong and long-term.
Thank you. Thank you. Jody?
Well, I think it's appropriate that the lady gets the last word, so I like that. I'll pick up on, John said planning, Arturo said people, and Steve talked about community. I agree with all of those things. I mean, I think social license has to be at the core of the strategy of every mining company. It's not something that other department does. It's something that we all need to do. And if I had to pick 2 areas that need to really shine in that, it's one, employee safety, and the other is community. And for us at Torex, I'm really proud of this one. In December, we hit 10 million hours lost time injury free at our site at Minera Media Luna through a collection of a whole bunch of strategies. This is never one thing, it's a whole bunch of things coming together at the same time. So really important for safety, particularly in a COVID year. And the last one is community. As Steve says, it can be a tricky thing. And I often say that governments give permits, communities give permission. And so what we need to do to obtain and maintain that permission is work at leaving what I describe as a net positive legacy. We need to know that those communities will be better off in the long run because the mining companies were there.